What does it mean to give everything to those you love, only to stand on the outside of their joy, unseen and unacknowledged? For Daniel Harper, this question wasn't just a fleeting thought, it was the ache that defined his days. At 52, he was a man who had built a life of quiet sacrifice, a life that now seemed to unravel in the shadow of a wedding he wasn't invited to, yet had poured his heart into funding. Daniel stood in his modest Chicago apartment, the city's skyline a distant shimmer through his window. The invitation he'd hoped for never arrived. His daughter, Lily, was getting married in Paris, the city of her dreams, to a man he'd never met. His ex-wife, Claire, had orchestrated it all, or so she thought. The truth was, Daniel had been the silent benefactor, funneling his savings into an account Claire believed came from her own investments. He'd done it for Lily, for the girl who once called him Daddy and begged for piggyback rides. Now, at 25, she was a stranger who hadn't spoken to him in years. The divorce had been brutal. 10 years ago, Claire's accusations of neglect and emotional distance had painted Daniel as the villain. He was a workaholic architect, always chasing the next project, but he'd never seen it that way. Every late night, every missed dinner, was for them, for Claire's dream house, for Lily's private school, for the future he wanted them to have. Yet, in the end, Claire took Lily and left, cutting him out like a flaw in a blueprint. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. Daniel learned about the wedding through a mutual friend, a casual mention that felt like a knife. Lily was engaged to a French artist, Julien, and the ceremony was set for a charming chateau outside Paris. Claire had been planning it for months, boasting about her financial savvy and pulling it off. But Daniel knew the truth. When Claire's investments tanked last year, he quietly stepped in, wiring money through a discreet account to ensure Lily's dream wedding wasn't compromised. He didn't do it for thanks, he did it because love, to him, was action, not words. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of restless nights and unanswered questions. Why hadn't Lily reached out? Did she believe Claire's version of their past? Daniel wrestled with the urge to call, to demand an explanation, but pride and pain held him back. Instead, he booked a flight to Paris. Not to crash the wedding, but to be close, to see her from afar, to feel the weight of his sacrifice in the city where it would unfold. Paris was alive with spring, the air thick with the scent of blooming chestnuts and the hum of romance. Daniel checked into a small hotel near the Seine, his heart heavy as he wandered the cobbled streets. The chateau was an hour's drive, but he couldn't bring himself to go there yet. Instead, he sat at a cafe, watching couples stroll hand in hand, their laughter a stark contrast to his solitude. He wondered if Lily ever thought of him, if she remembered the man who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd stayed up late sketching her favorite fairy tale castles. On the eve of the wedding, Daniel's resolve faltered. He sat in his hotel room, a glass of bourbon in hand, staring at a photo of Lily at 10, her gap-toothed smile beaming as she held his hand at a county fair. The memory stung, and he was about to pour another drink when his phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, "Meet me at Café de Flore, 8 p.m. We need to talk." Curiosity and dread warred within him. Who could it be? Claire? Lily? Someone else entirely? He arrived at the cafe early, his nerves frayed, and took a seat by the window. The crowd was lively, but he felt like a ghost, invisible to the world. At exactly 8 p.m., a woman approached his table. She was in her 30s, with sharp features and a hesitant smile. "Daniel?" she asked. "Yes," he said, standing. Do I know you? I'm Elise, Julian's sister. Her accent was soft, her eyes kind but searching. I know about the money. The account you set up for the wedding. Daniel's heart stopped. How? Julian found out. He's an artist, but he's good with numbers. He traced the funds back to you. Claire doesn't know, and neither does Lily. But I had to meet you. I had to understand why you'd do this and not tell them. Daniel sank back into his chair, the weight of his secret exposed. I did it for Lily, he said simply. She deserves her dream, even if I'm not part of it. Elise leaned forward, her voice low. You don't know, do you? Lily wanted to invite you. She fought with Claire about it, but Claire insisted you didn't care, that you'd moved on. Lily was heartbroken, Daniel. She thinks you abandoned her. The words hit like a tidal wave. All these years, he'd assumed Lily had chosen Claire's side, that she'd erased him from her life. But Elise's revelation cracked open a truth he hadn't dared to hope for: his daughter still cared. The twist was a gut punch, shifting the narrative he'd built in his mind. Lily hadn't forgotten him, she'd been misled, just as he had been. Why are you telling me this? Daniel asked, his voice hoarse. Because Julian and I believe in second chances, Elise said. Tomorrow, at the wedding, there's a moment planned for Lily's father to walk her down the aisle. Claire told her you wouldn't come, so Julian's uncle is stepping in. But I think it should be you. Daniel's breath caught. The idea of walking Lily down the aisle, of seeing her in her wedding dress, was a dream he'd buried long ago. But fear crept in. What if she rejected him? What if Claire's lies had taken root too deeply? Elise reached across the table, her hand resting lightly on his. She needs you, Daniel. Not the money, not the sacrifice, but you. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Daniel drove to the chateau, his heart pounding as he parked at a distance. The grounds were a vision of elegance, with white roses and fairy lights adorning the pathway. Guests mingled, unaware of the man standing in the shadows, wrestling with his decision. He saw Claire first, radiant in a navy dress, directing staff with her usual command. Then he saw Lily. She was breathtaking, her white gown flowing like a river, her face glowing with a mix of joy and nerves. Daniel's throat tightened. She was no longer the little girl in pigtails, but she was still his Lily. He took a step forward, then another, until he was close enough to hear her laugh. It was a sound he hadn't heard in years, and it broke something inside him. Before he could second-guess himself, he approached. Lily, he said softly. She turned, her eyes widening. Dad? The word was a lifeline. Tears welled in her eyes as she rushed to him, throwing her arms around him. You came, she whispered. I thought you didn't want to. I've always wanted to, he said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry, Lily. I never stopped loving you. Claire's face paled as she saw them, but Daniel didn't care. This moment was his and Lily's. When the music started, he offered his arm, and she took it, her smile brighter than the Parisian sun. As they walked down the aisle, the weight of years fell away. The guests murmured, Claire's composure faltered, but none of it mattered. Daniel was where he belonged. Later, at the reception, Lily pulled him aside. Julian told me about the money, she said. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't about me, Daniel replied. It was about you being happy. She hugged him again, and for the first time in a decade, Daniel felt whole. The wedding he'd funded in secret had given him something far greater than an invitation. It had given him back his daughter.